Hi, I'm Paul Arthur. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we have lined up for you tonight. Controversial new Liberal MP Michael Ma, who crossed the floor from the Conservatives, will be traveling with the Prime Minister on his visit to China. Plus, Iran cuts off public internet and phone access as it threatens to crack down on protesters as the movement spreads across the nation. And protests continue in American cities after the ICE shooting in Minneapolis, and we take a look at when lethal force is legally justified in the U.S.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Thanks for joining us. New Liberal MP Michael Ma, who made headlines after crossing the floor from the Conservatives back in December, will be joining Prime Minister Mark Carney on his trip to China next week. Ma was born in Hong Kong and will travel alongside Cabinet Ministers Anita Anand, Melanie Joly, and Tim Hodgson. Meanwhile, one of the two Canadians who Beijing detained for nearly 3 years is weighing in on the Prime Minister's Chinese trip. Former Canadian diplomat Michael Kovrig says Carney will need to hold the line on the country's interests and values while seeking economic growth and rebuilding ties.
The government needs to be perhaps judicious about when it speaks out and how it speaks out, but it should not allow China to condition it into silence over egregious issues, because that becomes a slippery slope, right? We gave you this one economic benefit, and then China notices, and as a result, they were quiet about those other things. That can keep building until eventually your foreign policy is constrained, and the behavior of leaders and government officials in Ottawa is to always look to Beijing first and see, well, if we do this or say this, what will China do? And as right there, you've been behaviorally conditioned, right? And so that's a very delicate diplomatic dance to manage. And so what Mark Carney is trying to do now is rebuild personal relations, leader to leader, and relations between his ministers and everyone on down, so that at least if we have disagreements in future, the hope is that the Chinese will seek diplomatic channels to address them.
Another round of protests are planned for today in Minneapolis over the killing of a 37-year-old mother by an ICE officer. Renee Good was shot while in a car on Wednesday during the Trump administration's latest immigration crackdown. We are going to show you a slow-motion visual of one angle of the shooting. Viewer discretion is advised. Records show the federal agent who pulled the trigger is an Iraq war veteran who has served for nearly 2 decades with immigration enforcement. And interesting to note, he was also seriously injured last summer when he was dragged by the vehicle of a fleeing suspect whom he had shot with a stun gun. Federal officials say it was an act of self-defense. Enforcement operations across the U.S. are under intense scrutiny as authorities say federal agents shot and injured 2 people in a vehicle outside of a hospital in Portland, Oregon last night. A Chicago law professor offers us some context on when lethal force is legally justified.
No! No! Shit!
I think the question is going to come down to, did the officer or was the officer reasonable in their belief that the driver presented an imminent threat of death or bodily harm to himself or to someone else? That's really the legal question that has to be answered. We do have several versions of the video from different vantage points that may elucidate that question and show us whether or not the officer could get out of the way. When it comes to the constitutional standard, there isn't a specific law or case that says an officer cannot shoot at or into a moving vehicle. In fact, there are cases where the Supreme Court has actually found that that's perfectly okay. But whether or not that's good police practice is a separate question. And at this point, most law enforcement agencies across the country actually prohibit officers from shooting at or into moving vehicles unless there are certain circumstances at play, meaning mostly that the person is deliberately using the vehicle to threaten the officer or someone else.
More anti-government protests continue to spread across Iran heading into the weekend. The unrest began nearly 2 weeks ago amid cries for freedom and relief from crashing economic conditions. At least 45 protesters have died so far, including 8 children.
Iran's supreme leader is signaling that his country is preparing to crack down on the demonstrators who've been protesting across the Islamic Republic over the last several days. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in particular targeted U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump in recent days has said that America is willing to use force to protect peaceful protesters in Iran should the theocracy there try to kill them. All this comes after demonstrations overnight that were sparked in part by a call from exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. That call saw thousands enter the streets in Tehran and elsewhere across the country. Now, Iranian state television today is calling those people terrorists. They're showing footage of fires in the streets and mosques and other buildings damaged. But there is a lot of anger in Iran, both over the economic situation and against Iran's theocracy, which has been in power since the 1979 Islamic Revolution.
Iranian authorities have cut public internet access and telephone lines in Tehran and other cities. The protests are seeing overwhelming numbers of young people taking part. Almost half of Iran's population is under 30 years of age. Longtime Liberal MP Chrystia Freeland has officially resigned today. Earlier in the week, the president of Ukraine announced he had appointed Freeland as an unpaid economic advisor to his country. Her absence from the Liberal caucus will leave the prime minister 2 seats short of a majority government. A by-election must now be called for the Toronto riding that Freeland had represented, and March would be the earliest that could happen. A detailed report on the 2024 rupture of a key Calgary water main cites underinvestment for its failure. Mayor Jeremy Farkas says he believes the city should spare no expense to replace it quickly as it deals with an ongoing second breakage.
Well, what this report says is that there's not one smoking gun nor one single bullet that's going to solve for this. It's successive decisions that were made across the city of Calgary over the past 20 plus years that contributed to the situation that we're in now. So the question becomes, what does City Council choose to do here and now going forward? I'm of the view, and I would argue many of my council colleagues are of the view, that we need to spend the time to do this right. If we have a certain need to operate a water utility at a certain point that we can count on it, and we will never have this happen again, I'm going to be very crystal clear with Calgarians about what that will take. Personally, I am pushing for sparing no expense to get this replacement line on, because we have to remember that right now we're dealing with a ticking time bomb. Below our feet at the Bears Paw feeder main is a ticking time bomb. It can continue to go off yesterday, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. It will continue to go off until we build that replacement line.
Calgary residents have been asked to reduce their water use. Officials say Calgarians are using much more than the targeted 485 million litres per day and are saying 3 fewer toilet flushes could bring it back from the brink of a water crisis.
Our smaller Glenmore water treatment plant is working hard to deliver 3 times the water it normally would. Additionally, we are using more water out of the Glenmore reservoir than normal. It is not refilling and the level is dropping. We are asking everyone to save 30 litres per day. If every person who relies on our water system saves 30 litres, we will hit the target of 485 million litres and keep that battery charged. This bottle holds 20 litres of water. 30 litres of water is 1.5 of these bottles. When you look at it in this perspective, this is not a lot of water. We can do this by flushing toilets only when you need to. Just flushing the toilet 3 less times in a day will save the 30 litres right there. Every minute you save in the shower uses 8 litres of water, and running your dishwashers and washing machines only when full will also continue to save water.
The amount of water in the Glenmore Reservoir, if we get this pipe returned to service next week, we have 2 more opportunities to take that pipe out of service and do urgent emergency repairs before we're in a critical state in the Glenmore Reservoir. That's why we are so focused right now on returning this pipe to service and working to get to the spring until those spring runoff starts to come in and restore the Glenmore Reservoir.
Since the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro last Saturday, expert opinions have multiplied regarding the future of Venezuelan oil amidst negotiations being pursued by the White House and the new Venezuelan administration, considering the U.S. is the main buyer of their oil, and it is also the main customer for Canadian oil. Experts in Canada warn that if crude exports to the American market are reduced, the federal government will need to seek alternatives to maintain economic stability. Professor Danny Leroy with the Department of Economics at the University of Lethbridge explains the potential impact on our national economy.
It's a problem for the government in terms of finding sources of revenue. And if it isn't coming from oil and gas, where is it going to come from? Taxing other productive people, taxing consumptive activities. The province of Alberta doesn't have the ability to print money. There's a foreseeable issue in terms of government financing if there is a large impact on the price of crude and how much can be sold, manufactured and sold in Alberta as a consequence of the changes that are taking place in Venezuela. The revenues that governments earn from oil exploration in the province of Alberta, as oil prices fall, the amount of revenue that the government collects falls. Those taxes also make it more difficult, more costly for people to extract oil and refine it and process it and distribute it. It also has the unintended effect of making it more difficult, more challenging for people to invest in producing and manufacturing and retailing products produced from crude oil obtained in Alberta.
According to the Canada Energy Regulator, in 2024, Canada exported 4.2 million barrels per day of crude oil, of which 95.7% went to the United States. The Lethbridge unemployment rate improved last December. Statistics Canada says it was a strong month for employment in southern Alberta, reporting an unemployment rate of 6.3% in the Lethbridge Medicine Hat economic region. Barb Wollstonecroft, manager at Teamworks Career Centre, gives us a general overview of the factors that contributed to the improvement in our unemployment rate.
From an employment services perspective, the improvement in the unemployment rate in December reflects stronger connections between job seekers and employers in Lethbridge, and increased hiring in sectors such as community and social services, health services, definitely retail and food services. But we're also seeing, from our perspective, an increase in activity from employers who are actively seeking new roles in their organizations. Teamworks, alongside other local employment agencies, work closely with job seekers, providing one-on-one career coaching, encouragement, and practical supports throughout the entire job search process. Happening in the future, we're cautiously optimistic about next months in the employment in our region. And we expect that there will be some increases in some health services. Construction should start to pick up again, hospitality and ag services.
By the way, Teamworks will hold its first career fair of 2026 at the beginning of March. The Lethbridge Hurricanes have announced the resignation of General Manager Peter Anholt after a WHL disciplinary investigation concluded that Anholt breached the league standard of conduct. Anholt was previously suspended temporarily this past November after using intimidating behavior and language following a game against the Edmonton Oil Kings. Today, the club accepted Anholt's resignation after it was mutually determined to be the best path forward following the conclusion of the investigation. The Hurricanes have appointed senior advisor Barclay Parnetta as interim GM for the remainder of the season. Parnetta previously spent 7 seasons as GM for the Vancouver Giants, leading them to a WHL championship in 2019. The Canes president of the board of directors, Doug Paisley, says the franchise will move forward with the highest commitment to fostering a positive player environment. Well, this isn't the only change the Hurricanes announced this last week. The WHL trade deadline came and went on Thursday night, with both the Canes and Medicine Hat Tigers being equally active this past week. The Hurricanes made a trade for Prince Albert Raiders forward Ollie Chenier in exchange for a 4th-round pick in this year's draft. The 18-year-old put up 13 points in 30 games this year with the Raiders. The Canes and Tigers then completed a trade with each other on Wednesday. The Canes' top scorer this season, Luke Cousins, was sent east to the Hat in exchange for defenseman Kyle Hegger, while each team traded a conditional fourth-round selection in 2028 to each other. Cousins posted a breakout season with 44 points in 39 games with the Hurricanes. The Tigers finished their acquisitions on Thursday, trading away forward Misha Volotovsky to the Vancouver Giants for 2 draft picks. Both teams are having polar opposite seasons, with the Tigers leading the Eastern Conference while the Hurricanes are second last. The recent fatal dog attack in Nova Scotia, in which a 13-year-old boy was killed while riding his bike, has raised concerns across the country about public safety and responsible pet ownership. While such cases are rare, animal control officials in Lethbridge note that dog-related incidents do occur locally. Skylar Plurd, Director of Services and Enforcement at Community Animal Services, says in 2025, the agency investigated 129 complaints related to dog bites or dangerously aggressive behavior. By comparison, only 3 complaints involved a cat biting or attacking a person.
And unfortunately, it's not the first time. There was a very serious incident that resulted in the death of a person in Edmonton in 2024, and a serious incident related to 3 loose dogs in Calgary that resulted in the death of a person a few years prior to that. The reality is it is 100% preventable. And we always hear comments about sometimes accidents are simply accidents. If you own an animal, you are 100% responsible for its care and control at all times. It doesn't matter if you're at work and your dog's got out of your house while you were at work. You are required to have done everything possible to prevent that from happening no matter what. Bad behavior that can cause dog bites or attacks to happen is a lack of socialization. We are often asked what type of dog is the most dangerous, and it has nothing to do with breed or size. It's an unsocialized dog, but obviously larger breed dogs are more likely to cause more damage in a bite situation.
In Alberta, depending on the severity of the attack and if there's any sort of history, owners can be charged and or fined. At least 2 Nova Scotia municipalities have tried to ban certain dog breeds in recent years, but weren't able to effectively enforce the bylaw. Stars Air Ambulance launched their 33rd annual lottery across Alberta today, with 3 dream homes, including one here in Lethbridge. The lottery supports base operations for Stars and allows the public to contribute to the saving of lives in emergency situations across Western Canada. The dream home in Lethbridge, located at 684 Devonia Road West, is valued at nearly $1 million and is nicknamed the Brock James. It is named after Lethbridge resident Brock James Higginson, a patient of Stars in 2020 who suffered a brain bleed and a seizure from 2 undiagnosed tumors in his brain.
I don't want to say it too much, but it's a little overwhelming, but, you know, honored and really proud. Yeah, it's great to see how much support there is here, and to Val and Mike again, just couldn't be more, happy that they chose me and honored. So,
if it wasn't for Stars, Brock wouldn't be here today, and we are very, very thankful. And like Brock said in his speech the other day, we were out for a walk and we saw the red helicopter in the sky, and even 5.5 years later, we stop and we thank God for the access that Brock had to Stars.
Well, the Brock James came as an inspiration where we wanted to really return to a traditional home that had a traditional kitchen as the heart of the home. So I would say that the features of the Brock James are the kitchen dining area, as well as the master bedroom and ensuite with a lounge in the master bedroom. And the Brock James is 2,500 square feet on 2 floors. It's a 2-story home. It's got 3 bedrooms in total, and it features very warm, traditional types of finishes.
In the last 40 years, Stars has carried out 63,000 missions and averages 10 per day from Alberta to Manitoba. Other prizes in the lottery include dream homes in Edmonton and Calgary, as well as vacation packages, vehicles, and cash prizes. Tickets can be purchased on the Stars Lottery website. Canada's unemployment rate jumped to 6.8% in December, despite job gains. Many were looking for work in December, which increased the number from 6.5% in November. With more is Michelle Zadikian with the Canadian Press.
Statistics Canada says a boost in the number of people looking for work in December drove the unemployment rate higher at the end of the year. The agency says the economy added 8,200 jobs last month, with gains concentrated in full-time work. The headline number exceeded economists' expectations. The unemployment rate, however, rose to 6.8% in December, from 6.5% a month earlier, as a growing labor force outpaced job gains in Ontario and Quebec in particular. Stacan says the labor market faced headwinds from U.S. tariffs through much of 2025, but conditions generally improved for job seekers toward the end of the year. CIBC senior economist Andrew Grantham says with more people once again looking for work, it suggests there's still plenty of slack in the labor market. This jobs data is the Bank of Canada's last look at the state of the labor market before its first interest rate decision of the year at the end of this month. Many economists have been forecasting the central bank will keep rates steady at 2.25% through much of this year.
Fears that Venezuela's oil resurgence could intensify competition with Canada are mounting. But some energy experts are brushing aside concerns that it will seriously threaten Canada's bulk oil supply to the U.S. Shares of Canada's top oil sands companies and the TSX Energy Subindex did tumble on Monday in response to worries that Venezuela's heavy crude could flood U.S. Gulf Coast refineries and edge out Canadian producers. But one Toronto-based oil market researcher said he's not worried that Venezuela will replace Canada's dominant role in providing oil to the U.S. because the bulk of Canadian oil, about 2.5 million barrels a day, is shipped by pipeline from Alberta to landlocked refineries in the U.S. Midwest. And now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 234 points on the day to 32,612. The Dow was up 237 points to 49,504. The S&P 500 was up 44 to 6966, and the Nasdaq was down 191 points to 23,671. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 98 cents to 58.74 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was down 26 cents to 3.14 U.S. Gold was up 30.72 to 45.0907 U.S. an ounce, and silver was up 2.96 to 79.91 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.40 per bushel. Barley is at $5.88. Canola is at $14.20, and corn is at $7.32 per bushel. Live cattle February contract was down $1.55 to $233.72. Feeder cattle were down $1.75 to $360.72. Lean hogs February contract was down 57 cents to $85.30. And the Canadian dollar was slightly down over the past 24 hours to 71.90 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, new Liberal MP Michael Ma, who crossed the floor from the Conservatives, will be joining Prime Minister Carney on his trip to China next week. Meanwhile, former Canadian diplomat Michael Kovrig, who was one of 2 Canadians detained by China in 2018, is warning that Carney will need to hold the line on the country's interests and values while seeking economic growth and rebuilding ties. Provincial and federal leaders are calling for the Prime Minister to quickly get pipeline projects moving after the U.S. takedown of Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro. With Donald Trump planning to access Venezuelan oil reserves, where will that leave Canada? Dave Naylor with the Western Standard joins me with his thoughts on this issue. Coming up next. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews.